And welcome back to another U.S. History Online lesson. In class, we're just finishing up the Great Depression. And one of the things that we're leaving the Great Depression knowing is that the New Deal did not end the Great Depression. In fact, we know that it will take World War II to get America's economy rolling again and to pull us out of the Great Depression. So that is where we begin today, by exploring the causes of World War II. First underlying cause that we want to talk about are the problems left over from World War I. So if you think back to what the Treaty of Versailles contained, you'll remember that the intent of it, at least from Great Britain, France, and Italy's perspective, was to punish Germany. Why? Because they blamed them for starting the war. As a part of that, they had to accept blame for that with the War Guilt Clause. $33 billion in reparations that Germany had to pay back. They were stripped of their military and land. All of these things left Germany in a position of embarrassment and left them in a position of almost economic ruin. They needed help. All of these things that were meant to punish Germany will pave the way for someone to take power who will start to ignore all of these provisions of the treaty, who will in turn blame the Treaty of Versailles for the position that Germany will find itself in with a economy that has collapsed, with a country just struggling to survive. And we'll talk about that person in a minute with Adolf Hitler. Another underlying cause that will allow people like Adolf Hitler to take power is the fact that it's not just the United States in a depression. The depression is expanded to a worldwide depression. There's high unemployment and low wages across the world. There's despair. There's no hope for the future. People are willing to try anything to get their country out of the position that they find themselves in. Remember, there's a lot of reasons that the world ends up in this worldwide depression. Think back to the Hawley-Smoot tariff under Hoover, where you start to see high tariffs going up in all sorts of countries, which puts international trade to a halt, right? The banking collapses in the United States. All of these things. People are looking for somebody to offer them hope, just as the United States had turned to FDR for that same reason. While many of FDR's critics attacked him for expanding the power of the federal government, he was doing nothing in comparison to what a group of dictators were doing in other countries across the world. And that is the next cause we're going to look at, the rise of dictators. And to introduce you to some of these men, let's take a look at these four. In the top left, you have Adolf Hitler of Germany. In the bottom left, you have Hideki Tojo of Japan. In the top right, you have Benito Mussolini of Italy. In the bottom right, you have Joseph Stalin of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, otherwise known as the USSR, what we know today as being Russia. All of these men would take great power and would use that power in ways that in many cases had not been seen before. And that will put us on a collision course for war. So what did these governments look like under these dictators? Well, under Joseph Stalin, you would have what is known as a totalitarian rule, which is where one party has complete control over the government. And in the USSR, that one party would be the Communist Party. And what would happen is the government totally controlled all aspects of society, including the economy. This is the exact opposite of what we have in capitalism. In Italy and also in Germany, you will see fascism, which places the nation above all else, above the individual, and where freedoms and rights are lost for the benefit of the nation. And in all four of these countries, we're going to see extreme nationalism, racism, and militarism used to promote the causes that these dictators are fighting for. In Japan, they have a very militaristic society. They put the military above all else. But one thing that is consistent with all four of these countries is the power lies in the hands of these four men. They are the ones calling the shots. All four of these men will start to do things that we will label as being aggressive behaviors or aggression. Because now we're moving into another cause of the war, aggression and appeasement. When we use the term aggression, we're talking about a warlike act by one country against another without just cause. And when we label something as being appeasement, we're talking about giving in to aggression in order to avoid war. It's that idea of, if I let him do this one last thing, I'm sure he will stop. Well, many of these dictators didn't stop. Let's take a look at some of these actions. Hitler will start ignoring the Treaty of Versailles by building up Germany's armed forces. The League of Nations will condemn this, but it does not stop him. Mussolini will invade Ethiopia in 1935. The League of Nations will condemn this action, but does not stop him. Japan will invade Manchuria in China in 1937. Guess what happens? The League of Nations will condemn this act, but does not stop him. And then, in 1938, Hitler will take over Austria. The League of Nations, you got it, will condemn him, but does not stop him. So what you see here is a chain of events. You see an aggressive behavior by one of these dictators and appeasement by the League of Nations. Two of the biggest players in the League of Nations was England and France. And both of these countries distrusted Adolf Hitler, but weren't willing to go to war. Remember, they are still feeling the effects of World War I. They're still trying to recover, just as the other countries we've talked about are as well. So once Hitler invades Austria, they'll call a conference in Munich to discuss these acts of aggression. And they'll come up with what's known as the Munich Pact, in which Hitler agrees, you know what, I will stop these acts of aggression. I won't go any further. I'm sorry that I've upset you guys. Let's be friends and let's move on from this. So he makes this promise, and as you probably are already guessing, he will break it. But it's just another example of appeasement of these dictators, how they're allowed to go unchecked for quite a long period of time. So you're probably wondering what the U.S. is doing during all of this. As you know, they're not a member of the League of Nations. Well, if you take a look at this timeline, after many of these acts of aggression, the U.S. is remaining neutral. In fact, after a number of these, they're stating, hey, remember, we're neutral by putting out a neutrality act. Well, these acts of aggression continue to go unchecked. And as we just said, at the Munich conference, Hitler says, I'll stop, but guess what? In 1939, he invades Poland. Why? He wants living space for the Germans. And at this point, Britain and France have had enough, and this will be the official start of World War II. So the immediate cause of World War II is Hitler invades Poland. Prior to invading Poland, Hitler had signed a non-aggression pact with Stalin and the USSR, saying, hey, we're not going to attack each other, we're not going to go to war with each other. This was all in an effort to get Stalin to let Hitler invade Poland and to not come into the war right away, even though Hitler had all intentions in the world of attacking Stalin later on because he needed it for Lebensraum, or living space. But when he attacks Poland, Hitler uses what's called a blitzkrieg, or a lightning war. And soon Hitler doesn't just take over Poland, he's moving quite quickly and is using these surprise attacks on places like Denmark and Norway. And eventually he turns to France, and France will soon surrender to Hitler and Germany, which will leave Britain fighting alone until the Soviet Union will join in. And then later, as they wait and wait and wait, the U.S. will be brought into the war. So the battle lines will look like this. You'll have Britain, France, and the USSR fighting for the Allied powers. And on the other side, you'll have the Axis powers in Germany, Italy, and Japan. So once the battle lines are drawn, and you can see on this map, Hitler moves quick. He is attacking lots of places. He's expanding. He wants to continue to expand. He's not content with stopping with just a little bit. All right, soon most of Europe is falling to Adolf Hitler. London and England standing alone will be crying for America to come help. And it doesn't happen until the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor in 1941. So that's it for today with the causes of the war. Remember, underlying causes, we're talking about problems left over from the First World War. We're talking about a worldwide depression. We're talking about a rise of dictators, appeasement and aggression. The immediate cause is when Hitler invades Poland. We'll see you next time.